But Cameron, that brings up something that Adam Silver actually just recently addressed at All-Star Weekend. In this Instagram post by Draft Express, he talks about the future of the G League Ignite, and he talks about how a lot of players born outside of the United States are showing that they are better development-wise and that there needs to be changes to the way that the United States AAU system kind of, and how that feeds into college and the NBA. And he kind of mentioned how the G League Ignite, like you mentioned, it's not really doing a good job of necessarily developing players at the moment, although it's still in its early years, and also getting people that exposure. And what would we like to see the G League Ignite turn into if it does fizzle out? You know, it sounds like here he's maybe thinking about having it become more of a focus on the younger players, like something before they're even college eligible, and maybe like high school, more like kind of grassroots. Now, I'm not an expert, but as I read into this, that's just kind of what I kind of pick out.
Kind of like an overtime elite?
Kind of, sort of, but not like just targeting that age range, you know?
I think the biggest highlight that I noticed in it was it says more of a focus on practice, less of a focus on games. That's really interesting because it's been a roller coaster, right? With the first year with probably the highest touted class for G League Ignite with Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga, they didn't get to play a lot of games, and they more did like training and kind of just work with some of the vets on that roster. Whereas the last couple of years, it's been a lot more about getting as many games as possible, which probably had to do with them trying to match what college offered prospects, where they can get a ton of games and potentially get into like a postseason format. I don't know what that is really going to do for them, though, because scouts, if they're not playing a lot of games in the Ignite format, essentially scouts will pretty much just be looking at high school footage for 5-on-5 like tape for these guys. And I feel like that has potential to lead to even more guessing if you're a scout in the draft, which I'm not sure what benefit that would bring to elevating what Team Ignite is.
Okay, so my idea for it would be disbanding the G League Ignite. Get rid of that. It's not working out. And I think the NBA has the NBA Academy now, and I think expanding that and making it almost like a soccer system where they get kids from a really young age and make their main focus basketball. Like, still have them get their education, of course, but make the main thing basketball. Like, we know what these kids are here for. And even if they don't make the NBA one day, they could possibly go overseas. Like, I think that would provide better players and just more skilled players than what AAU is providing, where they play 6 games in a weekend and hardly ever practice. Like, some AAU teams just never practice. So that's not really getting you better. I feel like something similar to soccer would, if you market it the right way and you put it on TV and you allow fans to connect with these kids from the time they're like freshmen in high school or late middle school, and we get to watch them maybe on the ESPN app or some streaming partner, we get to watch them come up all the way until college, and then you let them go to college where they can get a core fan base of people who root for a certain school and get that experience, and then get them to the NBA. I think that's a perfect way to kind of fix 2 problems at once: the player development problem the NBA has and the problem of not as many stars in the league.
Someone get this man on NBA Shark Tank.
Well, I think, too, what he's speaking on, I've sent it to some of you guys here on the pod, but there was a clip of Kobe a few years before he died, and he was talking about some of the problems with the AAU system, and he was talking about how, like you mentioned, there's a lot of people who just play games and don't really practice, and there's also, I think he was also implying that there's a little bit of corruption with like the shoe deals, and that's probably true. But I think that if G League Ignite does stay, I think it would be cool if they kind of did like a feeder system, kind of like what you mentioned, where like they still have the team in the G League, but they also have like kind of the NBA America Academy or whatever, where they get like those top guys and they kind of just work with them, and it's focused on, okay, you have the potential to get to the league. Now let's get you to that point where you're not only skilled individually, but you're skilled as a team player. And I think that's something that we're kind of seeing. I think that's really the main problem. It's not necessarily that, I don't want to say European players are more skilled than American players. I think it's just that they don't know how to thrive in a team setting, you know? Because you look at these AAU highlights and these clips and all you see are kids who just are dominating or they're their best player. And it gets to a point where you're seeing kids who are just getting bored because, you know, they're coming down the court in a fast break doing windmills off the backboard and stuff you wouldn't try in an actual game you're taking serious.
It almost seems like the standard for what is quality is just different for like American audiences versus what a lot of international teams deem as good. Like when you see a highlight or some sort of post on social media where some kid on an AAU team scored like 47 points in a win, nobody really cares or looks to see if he was 20 of 48 from the field or something to get those points. They're just like, wow, like that's a flashy number and that kid must be good. Whereas I feel like a lot of times international players, like even on Tankathon, when they show the international stats for prospects, they have a little disclaimer where it says international stats like basically aren't on the same category as like college or American stats. So I think a lot of it has to just do with the consumption of that AAU content, like Overtime or Ball is Life. It's just a different standard. And I don't know how you fix that because it seems like once you kind of take those highlights out of the hat, you can't really put it back in because people are constantly looking for one-upsmanship on social media. So,
Yeah, I think another part of like maybe expanding the NBA Academy would be you get to introduce the kids to the overseas kids early. Like you get to go and play NBA Academy Africa or something like that. Like whereas now like you think you know you're good, like compared to the kids here, but you don't know if there's a Luka Doncic over there that's better than you. I think that would just provide
that would be cool.
That would provide a different level of just awareness and like I have to push myself to be better.
What you bring up, I don't know if y'all watched it, but it actually reminds me of something that the NBA tried before COVID, and I think it just ruined it. But they actually kind of had like a Little League World Series, but for basketball. Like they did it, they called it like the Junior World Championship.
The Junior NBA Championship.
So I feel like if they had kind of kept doing something like that, where it kind of touches on what you're talking about, where like, okay, you get to play the best kids in America, but you also get to play the best kids all across the country. And I think something like that would actually be pretty good. I think for when they did it, it was only for like middle school kids. But if you do that when you're in high school, and obviously where it's at now, I think NBA Academy, even across the world, is still kind of small. So like if they could grow it and like get it to that point, I think this is also an issue that's not going to be solved in like a few years. Like what he's getting at, it sounds like it starts now, but it's going to take a while. But if they can get to that point, I think that will be beneficial not only for us, but just for kids not only in Europe, but even Africa, Asia, you know, places that don't get as much representation in the league now.